Hello, my name is Emil Ivanov and this is Beyond the Limitations. This is part 3 of my interview with Tom Campbell, a physicist and a consciousness researcher. In part 2, we talked about Tom's big theory of everything and its key tenets, including its surprisingly simple assumptions. Today, in part 3 of our interview, we will cover the fact that contemporary science is abound with paradoxes which cannot be explained by the existing scientific theories. Tom will cover how MBT explains some of those paradoxes in physics in a simple and logical way. We will cover things like quantum entanglement and quantum tunneling, what is space-time, how was it created, what is the universe expanding into, what was the Big Bang, etc., etc. Please make yourselves comfortable and let's begin. Tom Campbell is a former NASA physicist who has been researching human consciousness for more than 45 years. He's the author of My Big TOE trilogy, where TOE, T-O-E, is an abbreviation for Theory of Everything. In his Theory of Everything, Tom describes the nature of our larger reality. He provides us a picture, a complete theory of consciousness, and explains the purpose and connection to that larger reality. If Tom's theory is correct, then this will change fundamentally the way we understand the world and the way we live our lives. Tom Campbell is currently in the process of organizing a number of quantum mechanics experiments which will prove or disprove his theory in the near future. Recently, I spent over 5 hours with Tom, which we have organized in a 6-part interview series, exclusively for WNESSTV. Tom's Theory of Everything, or abbreviated MBT, is a comprehensive scientific theory which states that our reality is created by the information processing power of consciousness. In other words, we are living in a virtual universe. It might sound incredible, but it actually isn't. This theory derives the fundamental purpose of existence in general, and our human existence in particular, from a very small, fundamental set of principles. In this way, it reconciles Einstein's relativity theory and the quantum mechanics theory, which have been at odds with each other over 100 years. At the same time, mass, space, charge, gravity and spin are casually accounted for, which has also been a mystery for physicists for a long time. As a result of this theory, physics and metaphysics become parts of one logical theory and are thus unified. Philosophy and theology have been integrated with science. Love and spirituality are both defined in terms of entropy, a measurable quantity, i.e. quantity suitable to the ways of physics. The normal and the paranormal are unified as ordinary artifacts of interaction within and between reality frame perspectives of the larger consciousness system. Let's go through some of the science paradox or physics paradox one by one and see how the virtual reality hypothesis or my big TOE theory would explain those. You already mentioned that the speed of light and the constant speed of light is easily explained by understanding how the speed of light depends on the resolution of the virtual reality in which we participate and how it cannot be exceeded. That's pretty intuitive once we know that we are living in a virtual reality. But what about other things, like for example the effects of gravity, mass, spin and charge?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of places to start. Let's start with the particles and spin and things like that. Then we'll go to gravity,
Okay.
electromagnetics, action at a distance, and then we'll go to some of the other things.
Okay.
Because they all kind of naturally feed that way.
Yes.
If we look at the very basics of materialist science, okay, mass is at the base of that. Charge is there. Time, mass, charge, time, space. These are kind of the basic quantities of which everything else is constructed. Okay, so if you have charge, then you have a moving charge, then you have a current, and so on. Okay, so there's these few basic things. All of these things are in themselves models. They're all models. Physicists can only measure the effects of things. You cannot measure the things themselves. Okay, so let's say one of the basic elementary particles is an electron. Okay. You can measure the mass and the charge, okay, of an electron. And that was done early on, probably 1700s, by Millikan in an oil drop experiment, where he sprayed little tiny drops of oil, and then he had like a capacitor with a charge plate, positive and negative, on either side. So by adjusting the charge on the plates, he could make these little oil drops either accelerate or, instead of falling under gravity, stay still. Give it just enough of the charge to counter gravity on the little oil drop. So he did that and basically saw that all of the various accelerations and so on came back to some unit of charge. There wasn't a you know, you couldn't have any sort of charge. It came in chunks. And he found the smallest chunk, which he called 1, and that was the electron's charge. So that had an electron. So he got the smallest unit of charge for the electron. And because of the acceleration related to that charge and the force that they understood with electrics, you know, and charge, they could compute mass. So therefore you got a charge and a mass of an electron, and at that point people decided that it was a particle of mass with charge. But what they actually were doing is that charge is an effect, okay, and acceleration's an effect, and so on, but it's as if. So you can't measure the thing itself. Nobody said, there's an electron. See,
you can't see it, you can't, yes.
It's not there.
Yeah.
So it is as if this thing we call an electron had charge, and as if it had mass, it moved as if it had these things. And then we take the as if and turn it into something that is a fact. It's not a fact. It's only a model. Our model that there is a particle there that has charge. And it turns out, of course, that model wasn't right, because in quantum physics and in just accelerating particles around in big beam accelerators for breaking particles apart, if you think of it as a mass with a charge, you don't get the right answer. Okay? So quantum mechanics tells us it's not a mass, but it looks as if. So now people say an electron is a point that has the attributes of mass and the attributes of charge. That's different, you see. It doesn't make it a little massive particle. And you can compute right answers of experiments with that thought. So all of our science, the foundations, we have these measurements of effects, such as how does it travel? How does it move? Is it attracted to magnets? Is it attracted to electric fields? And how does it move in them? All of these are as ifs. They're not the real thing, and they're models. Okay, so that brings us to the idea of, you know, and charge and mass and all of those things. So particles act and react as if they had mass. There is momentum as if there was mass. There is, you know, electric charge and fields as if, you know, those exist. Well, we also posit these fields. Okay, we have electric fields. And if you have a charge that moves, it generates an electric field. And you have magnetic fields. If I have a magnet here, and I have a magnet here, and they're both opposite, then there's a force that attracts them. We can measure the force. And we say that the force goes from here to here because there's a field, it's a magnetic field. There is no such thing as magnetic fields, just like there is no such thing as electrons. Magnetic fields are a model that we create because we want to believe that there's a physical cause between the pole the plus magnetic pole here, the minus magnetic pole there, or the plus charge here and the minus charge there. Okay, we want to believe there's a physical reaction going on because our materialist beliefs say there must be some kind of physical thing. So this electric field between this plus charge and that minus charge is a field that travels through space, gets there, and puts a force on this one. There is no field. And I always like to quote, let's see, what was his name? Oh, no, it escapes me. It'll come to me in just a little bit. The more you try to think about it, the harder it is to get it, isn't it? It'll come to me. But anyway, he was one of the world's great physicists. And most of the physicists whose names you recommend were his students. And John Archibald Wheeler, okay, very famous guy, very good physicist. And he started his career, he said, when I began my career, I thought everything was particles. And then I realized that they couldn't be particles. And then I thought everything was fields. And then I realized that there weren't any fields. And now I think that everything is information. So he's the guy that coined the term it from bit, meaning our reality from information. And he was absolutely correct. He grew to see the fallacy in both the particles and the fields. You see, there's a big difference between predicting something and causing it. I can predict that the sun will come up in the east tomorrow, but I don't cause it. I just predict it. So if you understand the rule set, you understand it's all information. The rule set says that if I have a plus charge here and a negative charge here, I will have a force between them, attracting them, which is proportional to the charge 1 multiplied times charge 2 and inverse by the square of the distance between them. Okay, that's just physics. Well, that's part of the rule set. So the rule set says that if I have this charge here and that charge there, that this one will move toward that one. If this one's fixed and that one's loose, they'll do that. There is no field. Field is our invention. It's as if there were a field connecting them, you see. So action at a distance doesn't really exist. And when action at a distance and field equations were first written, a lot of physicists had a problem with it. They said, no, you know, what you're saying is that it's mathematics that makes the force. Mathematics doesn't make the force. That doesn't make any sense. There is no real action at a distance. It isn't. It's just the rule set. The rule set defines the connections between, the interactions between charges in that way as a function of the distance between them. So you can eliminate fields as a real thing. Fields, equations are part of the rule set. Yes, the equation predicts that, but predicting it and causing it are not the same thing. So the field doesn't cause it, the rule set causes it. All right, so that gets us to gravity. Gravity is thought of now as a field, a gravitational field. Okay? Again, there is no field. Gravity is just simply part of the rule set. And we had one understanding of gravity, say 50 years ago. And that was that if you had two masses, they would attract each other. They always attracted each other. Very much like the charges. M1 times M2 divided by the, square of the distance between them, right? Same kind of thing. Well, that's part of the rule set, that all masses attract. Well, then we had Einstein with his general relativity. He said, no, it's not like that. It's not masses attract. You have curvature to space-time. And space-time is big masses, like have deep holes in space-time, a lot of curvature. And another mass comes up and kind of rolls downhill to it. And that's how it works. They are just different models of gravity. There is no curvature in space. That's a model that helped Einstein predict correct answers. And it helped. It's a better model than the Newtonian model of the two masses, because it allowed him to also add the corrections for relativity to fast-moving particles, because there was some difference there. And without that worry about fast-moving particles, then Newtonian method comes to the same answers as the relativity method. Okay, they're just different models. There is no field of gravitation. There are no waves in gravitation. Well, what, a year and a half ago, gravitation waves are measured, right? Big headlines. They had this big thing that, okay, there was a big event out in outer space and some massive thing blew up or whatever, and they expected to see a change in the gravitational force at the time of the speed of light from there to here. And indeed they did. But what they measured wasn't a gravitational wave. That's what they called it. What they measured was a change in the gravitational force. Forces are real, things that you can measure. Waves are imaginary things you make up to explain why something happens there, and you can measure something else over here, action at a distance again, you see. So it's just the rule set. In a reality based on calculation, there's a rule set that says if something happens there, the quickest that it can get here is 1 pixel of distance per pixel of time. So eventually here you'll have a change in force. So they didn't measure a wave at all. That was just in their own metaphor, if you will.
It's a metaphor, yes.
Yeah, waves aren't real. Action at a distance is just a rule set. It's the way the rule is. So as long as it's information, you see, you can calculate it. I have a big star blow up here, and at so much time, I will have a force on a particle or something here. And sure enough, that's the way it is. But it happens because there's a rule that says that's the way it works.
And the rule is part of the rule set is how the virtual reality works.
That's how the virtual reality works.
Yeah.
So what you measure are forces. They're measurable. See, forces are real from our perspective. The electro or the magnetic or the electromagnetic or the gravitation waves that we make up because it makes it seem physical, that the force is somehow traveling here. But how is it traveling here? It's traveling here at the speed of light on waves that can't be measured, have no odor, can't feel them, can't touch them, can't put them in a bottle. They take up no space. You see, they're imaginary. Oh yes, you can put a particle in that electric field and it'll have a force on it. But you're measuring a force, not a wave. It's as if there was a wave, but there is none. So gravity is just part of the rule set. It's information. We can compute what the gravity will be someplace, but the fact that we can predict it doesn't mean that it's caused by a wave. It's caused by information being computed.
Yeah.
You see? So that's how that works. And there's a big difference between causing something and being able to predict it. if you know the rule set, you can predict it. But the cause is the fact that there is a rule set, not that some wave travels from here and makes something happen.
Isn't that observation true for any movement?
Yeah.
The movement of light.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the movement of light. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. See,
There is no movement. It's just information.
yeah. It's not that there is something
Yeah.
physical moving from here
There's
to
no
there. That
yeah.
doesn't happen.
Yeah.
All right. So now we get to a thing that falls into this, which would be, you know, the electrons spin up and the electrons spin down, and you move these. They're together, and you move them out to opposite ends of the universe. Right? Entanglement.
The quantum entanglement.
You flip this one, and that one flips, same time. How does that happen?
What moves?
How does the information get from this one to that one? How does this one know when that one flips? Because it seems to be instantaneous. See, there's no way to do that, right? Because it would take more than light speed to do that, because opposite sides of the universe are going to take a few years between this one for the information to get there on a light beam, but you do this and that, or this and that happen at the same time. That's because there's a conservation of momentum. To begin with, you had one particle. Now you have spins. One has to be up, one has to be down, because you started with none. So you separate them, the particles have spins. They're not really spinning. That's another metaphor. It's part of the rule set. You don't have little particles that are spinning. We make that up. So you move them away, and this goes from up to down, this goes from down to up right away. Well, it's a rule set. It's an if-then statement. Okay? If this does that, then that does that. Well, there's no space. There's no space between one statement and the other.
Nothing moves.
So
yes.
it's just computed.
Yes.
There's really nothing in there. It's part of the rule set. So that is, you know, that's all there is to it. It's an if-then statement in the code. So, and there'd be two ways for the system to code that. If they had this came in the code first, then that would be the statement right under it. So it'd be instantaneous, all within the same delta t. Or if this came in the code, if this happened and then this was up somewhere, the if statement was up above it in the, you know, we're talking about